So hang on. If consciousness is fundamental, if everyone and everything is made up of consciousness, does that imply that other people don't exist? That they are just a fabric of my imagination? That the world is just made up by me? Well, that's a very valid question to address. And I'd figure in this episode, let's dive a bit deeper into it. So, non-dualism, or consciousness-only model, suggests that consciousness is the fundamental fabric of reality. It is what creates the world and everyone in it. And it's easy to misunderstand that what is suggested is that everything comes from my consciousness, from my mind. In everyday language, we understand consciousness as being something that exists inside my brain. But if we want to understand what's suggested with consciousness being fundamental, we kind of have to take a step back from those limitations we put on consciousness. So what I mean by that is that the common understanding of consciousness in our time and age is that it is produced by the brain. And that means that you have your own consciousness inside of your brain, and I have my own consciousness inside of my brain. So if we go with that definition of consciousness, it sounds quite absurd, because that means that the suggestion that everything's made up of consciousness, it makes it sound as though everything's made up of my consciousness, of this person's consciousness. And that would imply that the world doesn't exist. I just make up other people. They are not existing in their own rights. And there's a model that suggests this. It's called Solipsism. But that is not what non-dualism in general suggests. It suggests something else, and that is that the consciousness cannot be understood as your consciousness and my consciousness. In fact, the universe only has one consciousness, one universal consciousness. And the consciousness that looks out through your eyes and the consciousness that looks out through my eyes, it is the same consciousness. So how does that work? Well, this is a bit tricky to understand, so walk with me, and if anything is unclear, please do ask a question in the comment section. I'm not trying to convince you that this is the way to understand reality. I'm trying to present what non-dualism suggests one can understand the reality. Whether we think that's true or not is completely up to ourselves. But before we evaluate it, we need to understand what it means. So, one universal consciousness, looking out through your eyes and through my eyes. How do we even begin to understand what that means? Because it sounds like it implies that it goes against our experiences, because you have thoughts and I have thoughts, and I don't have access to your thoughts, and as far as I know, you don't have access to my thoughts. So there seems to be a bit of an individuality to our experience, which there is, even according to non-dualism. But it doesn't suggest that the consciousness is individual. It suggests that the mind is individual. And in this case, the mind is everything that makes up this person. My name is Josephine, by the way, so everything that makes up Josephine is personal. My thoughts, my memories, my opinions, my dreams, they belong to this little cluster of human. But the consciousness that observes it has nothing to do with this human's personal things. One way to look at it is a metaphor that I quite enjoy. It's almost like thinking that consciousness is water, an endless water. And in this water, there are little whirlpools, little twists of water. And that can be seen as my mind. So my mind consists of consciousness folding itself in a unique way, just like a river can fold itself into a whirlpool. There is nothing to the whirlpool other than water. It's just water folding itself. You cannot take the whirlpool and pick it out of the water. But still it is unique. It has a uniqueness to it. And same with my mind, with Josephine. I have a uniqueness to me. I have an individuality. But it doesn't need to be made of anything other than consciousness folding itself within itself, creating a uniqueness, creating an individuality, while still being made of universal consciousness, by still being made of the infinite water pool. So in other words, non-dualism suggests that the individuality isn't on the level of consciousness. It is on the level of mind. And then one might say, well, what's the big deal about this? Well, maybe you don't think it's a big deal, and that's fine. But for me, it has huge implications for understanding life, understanding myself, and understanding my relationships. Because when I observe my mind, it's easy to think that I am Josephine. I have these experiences, I am this many years old, I have this degree, I have blah, 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 blah. But when I actually go to who am I really, I realize that the essence of who I am is not my mind. And I'm not telling you to explore this. This is like a self-inquiry journey. But this is where most people end up. So the essence of Josephine isn't my memories. Because I'm 42 now. And when I was 5 years old, I was still me. And in the course of those decades, up to me being 42, there has been a lot of opinions that's been coming and going. There's been a lot of new memories formed. I have forgotten many things that I knew when I was 5. I knew what I had for breakfast back then, but I have no idea now what I ate for breakfast then. So a lot of things about my mind, such as thoughts and emotions and values, they have been switched out. They're not the same anymore. But what has been stable, what is the one thing I actually mean when I point to me, that is consciousness. And if I were to forget everything about myself, if I woke up with no memory, there would still be a sensation of me. I mean, there might be confusion there, obviously, but I wouldn't feel like I have somehow become something else. The me-ness stays. And that's quite an astonishing realization, because then the thing I mean me is the universal consciousness. It's the same thing that when you mean you, if you actually look, if you go deeply into if this thought comes and goes, that cannot be me. So, yeah, the way we identify who we are is different depending on how we see what consciousness is. And then how we understand consciousness, if I think that it pops up outside of my mind, like my brain created the consciousness, it is very different than if I think that universal consciousness was there, folded itself into a whirlpool that looks like a brain when perceived from the outside. And in this idea that consciousness can fold itself into individual little twists and turns, then you also exist. You exist in the sense that you are a unique whirlpool. This whirlpool, called Josephine, didn't make you up. You are not a product of my whirlpool's imagination. No, you are the result of universal consciousness folding itself into itself. So it makes a huge difference if we understand consciousness as individual, or if we understand consciousness to be the universal one. So in that sense, non-dualism suggests that there are other people out there. They have their own inner experience. Their whirlpool, their minds, are doing things that are completely irrelevant of my imagination. The world is made of universal consciousness, not my consciousness inside my brain. Yeah. And for me, understanding non-dualism, this was crucial. it kind of is the thing that clicks it all into place. Does it mean that non-dualism is ultimately true? No, it doesn't. Not even for me. For me, what it does is it orchestrates things so that I can understand them logically. And for me, it is the most plausible explanation of reality that I've come across so far. And this piece of the puzzle is crucial to even understand what's suggested. Yeah. And I feel so excited about this topic. And if you have the same curiosity, if you're already on board with this teaching, maybe you also believe it's the most plausible one, or maybe you just dipped your foot into it, trying to understand what's even suggested, you are warmly welcome to this channel. Yes. And if I've seen you before, I'm very glad to have you back for this episode as well. And I think that was all. I hope to see you next time, my friend.